The world watches, on edge, as two powerful leaders prepare to meet in Alaska. The fate of a nation still ravaged by war hangs precariously in the balance. Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being truly well-informed. We cut through the noise to bring you the most credible insights into global events. Today we are embarking on a really crucial deep dive into the high-stakes diplomatic and military landscape surrounding the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Our focus, well, it's that highly anticipated summit between President Trump and President Putin, set for this Friday, August 15th, 2025, in Alaska. Now, the immediate context for this meeting is absolutely crucial. Just 2 days ago, right, August 13th, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy and our roster of key European leaders, German Chancellor Merz, Macron from France, the UK's Keir Starmer, they held these urgent virtual calls with President Trump. Their mission seemed pretty clear: consolidate their collective agenda, push their demands before Trump actually sits down with Putin.
So this deep dive, we're going to unpack the intricate diplomatic strategies, the frankly grim military and economic realities on the ground, and Europe's incredibly complex, evolving role in all this. We're here to help you navigate this dense web of interests, the pressure shaping this pivotal moment. You can feel it. There's a palpable tension in the air, particularly among European officials. Many are deeply concerned, worried about being excluded from direct talks. They fear what some are calling a second Yalta, that reference to the post-World War II conference.
Right, where the big powers decided things for other nations.
Exactly, rather than with them. This time, the concern is an agreement that could decide Ukraine's fate without its participation. Okay, let's unpack this then. The core event driving all this diplomatic flurry is, without a doubt, the Trump-Putin summit. It's been framed as a feel-out meeting. What exactly does that mean? What's the goal here, and what are the key players pushing for?
Yeah, it's fascinating how each side is trying to position itself, and you've hit the key phrase there. President Trump has indeed described this Alaska summit as a feel-out meeting, which signals, I think, a pragmatic approach. His stated goal seems to be primarily about gauging Putin's seriousness. Is he really ready to end the war? And most immediately, can they secure a ceasefire? It suggests he's looking for an initial breakthrough, maybe just a temperature check, rather than hammering out a comprehensive peace deal right away.
And on the other side, you have Ukraine and Europe.
Right.
They seem to be speaking with a remarkably unified, pretty firm voice. What specific messages did they get across to Trump just now?
That's right. That unity between Kyiv and its European allies, that's been a really significant development. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, he played a pivotal role organizing those virtual calls on the 13th with Zelenskyy, Macron, Starmer, Ursula von der Leyen too. And their demands for Trump before he meets Putin were, well, unequivocal, really firm. First, they insisted a ceasefire must come immediately. That's the absolute non-negotiable priority. Stop the bloodshed now. Second, this ceasefire needs to be followed by reliable security guarantees for Ukraine and a proper framework agreement. And critically, they were crystal clear. Absolutely no legal recognition of Russian occupations, no changes to borders by force. Chancellor Merz, he didn't mince words. He stated legal recognition of Russian occupations is not up for debate.
Very clear.
Yeah, and this all powerfully reinforces that principle of no negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine.
Right.
That's a red line reaffirmed by both Starmer in the UK and Zelenskyy himself. They're making it plain. Ukraine's future isn't going to be decided behind closed doors without them.
And Zelenskyy, he's been absolutely steadfast on rejecting land concessions. He sees Putin's demand, Ukraine withdrawing from that 30% of Donetsk they still hold, as not just politically impossible, but unconstitutional. He even called it a prelude to further aggression. How does that stance impact the maneuvering?
Well, it creates an immediate, really fundamental conflict right at the negotiating table, doesn't it? Zelenskyy's position means any talk of land swap, any formal giving up of territory, it's just a non-starter for Kyiv. What's interesting, though, is how President Trump's own stance seems to have, perhaps, evolved in response. Initially, remember, he'd floated the idea of possible territorial concessions as maybe a path to peace.
Right, that was out there.
But now, after these talks with European leaders, reports suggest he explicitly said he would not discuss territory divisions with Putin this Friday. His focus, he reportedly said, would be squarely on getting that initial ceasefire. He also mentioned maybe a quick second meeting that could include Putin, Zelenskyy, and himself, if this first one goes okay, suggesting maybe a multi-party negotiation could follow. And significantly, we've heard these strong warnings from Trump, too. Very severe consequences for Russia if Putin doesn't agree to a ceasefire. That signals maybe a shift towards a more forceful approach on de-escalation, rather than focusing on territory swaps right now.
So on the flip side, what about Putin? What are his strategic demands? What kind of leverage is he trying to build just before these talks.
Putin's core calculus, often described by the Kremlin, is, well, chillingly stark. What is taken by blood is kept by steel. It reflects his deep-seated belief that territories seized militarily won't be easily given up. His big goals remain pretty consistent: full control of those 4 Ukrainian regions Russia has claimed, permanent neutrality for Kyiv, and significant limits on Ukraine's military. What's really fascinating, though, is how Russia is actively expanding its leverage on the battlefield right now, ahead of these talks. Between August 5th and 12th, just last week, Russian forces gained 76 square miles of Ukrainian territory.
76 square miles in a week.
Yeah. To put that in perspective, that's a massive 145% increase in the rate of gain compared to the week before. Wow. These gains were mainly concentrated in the Dobropoltia-Pokrovsk sectors of Donetsk areas, strategically vital for their goal of controlling the whole Donbass region. These military advances, they're designed to strengthen Putin's hand, right? Create this narrative that momentum is on Russia's side, that fighting more only means Ukraine loses more territory.
But President Zelenskyy seems to see right through this, doesn't he? He's publicly said Putin is bluffing about the military gains and about sanctions not working. He's calling for more pressure.
Exactly. Zelensky's view is that these gains are tactical. They don't show a decisive strategic shift. And he insists Russia's economy is feeling the strain, despite what the Kremlin says. It just highlights the deep skepticism about any real willingness from Moscow to compromise right now without significant external pressure.
Okay, here's where it gets, well, really tough to talk about. While diplomats are talking, the reality on the ground is just stark, incredibly grim. What's the current military situation actually like for both sides? And how is this long war truly impacting them beyond just the lines on a map?
The human and material costs, they're staggering. Truly hard to fully grasp. As of August 12, 2025, Russian forces control about 19% of Ukraine's territory. Now, that includes Crimea and parts of Donbass seized before the full-scale invasion in Feb 22. But since that invasion, Russia has gained an additional 28,158 square miles. That's about 12% of Ukraine's total landmass. And this isn't just empty land, you know. It includes vital infrastructure, farms, cities.
And the human toll, the casualties, it's immense on both sides. Just awful numbers.
It truly is. As of April 2025, estimates were over 790,000 Russian servicemen killed or injured. Some estimates were reaching over 1 million by June. For Ukraine, equally devastating. Around 400,000 servicemen killed or injured by January 2025, with some estimates suggesting over 700,000 by May. President Zelenskyy made this poignant point, didn't he? He said, while Russia might have 3 times more weapons, it also suffers 3 times more losses. It just points to this brutal, grinding, attritional style of warfare. Equipment losses, too, are huge. Russia's lost over 22,400 pieces of equipment, tanks, artillery, you name it. Ukraine, over 9,500. These aren't just stats. They're shattered lives, diminished capabilities for both armies.
And beyond the battlefield, the impact on civilians, the damage to Ukraine's infrastructure, it's devastating. What does that look like day to day for ordinary people?
It's a humanitarian crisis unfolding every single day. July 2025 was, tragically, the deadliest month for Ukrainian civilians since May 2022. 286 killed, nearly 1,400 injured just by Russian actions in 1 month. Imagine living under that constant threat. And Ukraine's critical infrastructure, systematically targeted, just ravaged. Its electricity generating capacity plummeted. Think about this. 80% of its thermal capacity lost by September 2024 because of Russian attacks.
80%.
Yeah. Losing 80% of thermal capacity, that's like losing power for several major European cities. It cripples everything, heating homes, running hospitals, factories, especially in winter. And chillingly, attacks on Ukrainian emergency services, firefighters, paramedics, they increased threefold in July 2025 compared to the month before. It suggests a deliberate targeting of those trying to help.
And the economic impact. How are these countries holding up under this incredible strain? The war? The sanctions? We hear conflicting things about how effective sanctions really are.
Well, the economic paths are quite different, revealing different vulnerabilities, I suppose. From 2022 to 2024, Russia's GDP actually grew by 5.6%.
Grew?
Yes, it surprised many. It's often put down to reorienting its economy, strong energy revenues from non-Western buyers, and increased military production domestically. But in sharp contrast, Ukraine's GDP contracted by a staggering 22.6% over that same time.
Wow, that's huge.
It really highlights the profound economic devastation war brings. Ukraine's budget deficit in 2024 was massive, 20.4% of GDP, not even counting grants. Russia's was much more manageable, 1.7%. That deficit means Ukraine is heavily reliant on foreign aid just to keep basic services running. Now, about sanctions. Europe's put 18 packages in place against Russia. President Zelenskyy consistently argues they are effective, they are hurting Russia's war machine, but some sources suggest these same sanctions are actually choking European economies.
How so?
It's not just losing Russian gas, though that's big. It ripples through industries needing cheap energy, makes European manufacturing less competitive, and sort of unexpectedly boosts demand for alternative, often pricier global suppliers. It's this complex feedback loop, where the cure has its own pretty significant side effects.
So, given these stark realities, military and economic, let's turn back to Europe. They're clearly walking this tightrope, right? Trying to support Ukraine, but also needing to shore up their own defenses. What's the data telling us about how they're balancing those priorities?
Europe has definitely been a substantial provider of aid. As of March 2025, total military assistance was $137.9 billion. That actually surpasses U.S. military aid, which was $114.6 billion. Germany alone mobilized around $40 billion since 2022. So a deep commitment is there.
Okay,
But, and this connects to the bigger picture, despite these big pledges, we are seeing a concerning trend. The level of European financial and military aid to Ukraine has actually declined over the past year. For example, Jan-Feb 2025, Europe provided $6.92 billion. That's way down from the $12.27 billion in Jan-March of the previous year.
That's a significant drop.
It is. It raises questions about long-term sustainability, maybe commitment fatigue.
And is the burden shared equally?
Yeah.
Or are some countries doing more?
There's a definite asymmetry in support. It highlights different perceptions of threat, different economic capacities. Smaller nations closer to Russia, like Estonia and Denmark, they contribute a much higher percentage of their GDP, 2.3% each, to bilateral aid.
Because it feels closer to home for them.
Exactly. It shows their acute understanding of the threat. In contrast, bigger economies like France are at 3.19%, Germany 0.44%. Now, Germany's absolute number is huge, obviously. But that proportional difference suggests for some the commitment runs deeper due to proximity, maybe historical experience.
And at the same time, we're seeing this drastic, almost unprecedented jump in European national defense spending everywhere.
Yeah.
Is that directly tied to Ukraine? What are they spending on?
Absolutely. European NATO defense spending has shot up since the full-scale invasion. Germany's spending, for example, rose from 1.64% of GDP in 2023 to 2.12% in 2024. They finally hit that NATO target, and future targets are incredibly ambitious. Poland's aiming for 4.7% of GDP by 2025. Estonia and Latvia want 5%.
5%.
Remarkable, isn't it? Sweden, the new NATO member, aims for 3.5% by 2030. These investments, they're mostly going into modernizing old equipment, building up ammo stockpiles, better training, bolstering border defenses, getting their own houses in order.
Which creates this fascinating dilemma, doesn't it? Our sources point out this risk that as countries pour money into their own militaries, support for Ukraine might be neglected. It feels like you can't fully do both. A zero-sum game.
It's a critical point, and some definitely see it as a dilemma. However, the counter-argument, and it's gaining traction, is that Ukraine should be seen as a security provider for Europe, not just a security consumer.
How does that work?
The argument is basically, if Europe fails to help Ukraine now and Russia achieves its goals, Europe will inevitably face higher costs for its own defense in the future because the threat will be right on its doorstep. So helping Ukraine is framed as a strategic investment in collective security, a kind of forward defense, not just charity. But it raises that important question. Can Europe really do both effectively at the same time, or is there an unavoidable trade-off, at least in the short term?
And how are policy recommendations trying to tackle this? Are there smarter ways to give aid? Maybe.
Precisely. This is highlighting the need for strategic innovation in how aid is delivered. One promising approach is this Danish model. It focuses on investing directly in Ukraine's own defense industry.
Instead of just giving them stuff.
Right. Rather than just donating existing equipment from European stockpiles, you provide funds or expertise to help Ukraine produce its own weapons, ammo, technology. It's seen as more efficient, more sustainable long-term. It helps Ukraine become more self-sufficient, boosts its economy, creates jobs, builds a more resilient partner. The overarching message from experts seems to be Europe needs clear, cohesive communication about its support, and it needs to really grasp that supporting Ukraine and boosting Europe's own strategic autonomy are mutually reinforcing goals. It's not a binary choice.
Two sides of the same coin, maybe.
Exactly. They argue these objectives really go hand in hand.
So as we look towards this Trump-Putin summit, it's clear the stage is set against this backdrop of, ongoing brutal conflict, immense human and economic cost, and Europe's really complex, evolving security strategy. It truly feels like a moment pregnant with possibility, yet just fraught with peril.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, history often teaches us that peace, especially after a conflict like this, it's likely to be a product of concessions, maybe more than a triumph of pure justice. You can draw parallels to moments like the Congress of Vienna in 1815 that achieved a pragmatic compromise it held for decades, or Yalta in 1945, which ended one war but, well, led straight into a tense stalemate and the Cold War.
Right.
The question for us, and really for the world, is whether this current diplomatic dance leads to a lasting peace, something built on sustainable terms. Or does it just lead to another, maybe even more dangerous, tense stalemate that just sets the stage for the next conflict?
As leaders deliberate the future in Alaska, will the world prioritize abstract principles, justice, international law, or will the stark pragmatism of power, which history so often seems to favor, prevail? How might this meeting, or maybe the lack of a clear resolution from it, reshape not just Ukraine's destiny, but the balance of power across the globe for decades to come? We'll definitely continue to deep dive into these unfolding questions.